Hey guys, it's Dani. Today we're gonna do another Q&A session. I do believe I have a few more questions that I actually filmed. I just didn't include in the video last time because it would have been too long. So yeah, if you think my videos are long, I'm actually editing them down, so you can imagine. So I'll answer those questions today as well, with some new questions you guys left in the comment section of my videos. So with that said, let's get to work. Swoka has a really good question. Isn't it risky to keep the orchids so close to one another because of possible contamination or spreading of infections? Absolutely! Many things we actually do in cultivation are very risky. Starting with something that I don't do because I just cannot. This is not a proper greenhouse, but in greenhouses, usually you hose down all of the orchids and all that water falls from one orchid to another or sinks from one pot to another, waters a few other orchids on its way. Very unsanitary if you think about it, but that's how we do things. There is a limit between hygiene and trying to maintain healthy populations and not spreading disease, and becoming so much of a hassle and an obsession that it's just not fun anymore. So yes, keeping orchids this close, even keeping them on the same shelf, is indeed risky. If that one has some bugs, the other one will have it as well. That's why we have some preventative measures. And I personally do spray at least my Phalaenopsis, or the orchids that are very prone to spider mites. I spray them twice a year with my concoction. But I cannot take all of the measures in the world to make sure that my orchids don't share stuff between them. New orchids do not go right away next to my older orchids. They sit in quarantine. Ideally, you put them in a different room. I don't have a different room. I just put them on the other side of the growth space. It's not ideal. I will be 100% with you guys. Many things are not ideal. And if you think about commercial greenhouses, how they hose everything down, you know me, I'm scared of sharing water. It's not ideal, but it is what we have. It's what makes the hobby be a hobby, not an obsession, not a hassle. So there is a line that I personally don't like to cross. I like to be balanced, and I think we should remain balanced. Just keep and maintain hygiene in your growing space. And if you really want to keep orchids very, very far to each other, do so. But at the same time, if you want to keep, let's say, 5 orchids in the same little shelf, do so. I mean, it's a hobby. It's not this sterile thing that must remain sterile and be a constant stress. So, you know, just enjoy the hobby like you want it. But to be fully honest, yes, it's not ideal what I'm doing here, but it is what we do. Siemens is asking if coffee is the best fertilizer for their orchid and how often to use this with the orchid. Well, coffee grounds are actually a very good fertilizer for the garden or for your potted plants. But for orchids, I believe it's absolutely not suited. I'm not gonna go into the details, but personally, I will not recommend you use your coffee. Of course, you'll find people who use all sorts of things to fertilize orchids, so I'm not gonna stop you from using it. If you really, really, really want to use it and try it out, you can try it out. I can advise you to try it out with one orchid only, but personally, I would just not experiment way too much with organic things that are not gone through the decomposition processes and they don't have the final, let's say, broken down formula that plants can actually absorb. In the garden and in soil in general, we have a different bacterial climate which helps break down and decompose things. Let's just think about the compost. But in our orchid pots, that doesn't really happen. So just be mindful, be careful, don't put it on all of your orchids. It's fun to try stuff, but as far as I'm concerned, coffee has no place on the orchid pot. Renee is asking if orchid roots should be planted above the reservoir. I think this is what you meant in leca or semi-hydro. And also if all pseudobulb orchids can be planted in leca. Well, inevitably the roots will grow down in the reservoir of semi-hydroponics. And it's okay because that reservoir continuously fluctuates. We never keep it always full. It depletes and actually offers oxygen to the roots. It doesn't stay full of water and oxygen depleted all the time. With new orchids, as you might have noticed in my semi-hydro repottings, I do add a layer of leca on the bottom and then the orchid roots. Sometimes new orchids are coming from a very different environment, so the roots are really not adapted to high moisture environments. So planting them above the reservoir just eliminates some of the risk of losing the roots. However, as the time goes by, roots will get into the reservoir, and as long as the temperatures are not very low and the reservoir doesn't stay full of the time, I personally have never experienced issues. I did experience some root loss as well, but this just happens all of the time with new orchids, not necessarily only in semi-hydroponics. Whatever medium you choose to plant a new orchid in, chances are some of the older roots will die off, will not adjust to the new environment. It might be that they already were a little bit sick, so it's not a semi-hydroponic issue necessarily. I personally don't have much issue with the roots in the reservoir. But if it makes you feel any better, yeah, put a layer of leca and then place the orchid. Don't place the existing roots directly in the reservoir because they might have some issues adapting. It might be better for them to stay on the top. Eventually though, they will go into the reservoir. As for the second question, it is very general. There are many orchids which have pseudobulbs, many with very different requirements or particularities. Some orchids have very sensitive roots, and leca might not be an ideal solution in every climate. It mainly actually depends on your environment, on your climate, on your lifestyle, and so on and so forth, on the brands you find available in your location. So no, it's not a general rule that all pseudobulb orchids will enjoy leca. For example, for me, some oncidiums or Oncidium intergenerics really dislike leca, so I have to return to an organic medium, but for other people, oncidiums do perfect in leca. For me, Cattleyas and Dendrobium phalaenopsis, I would not dream in placing them in something else rather than leca, but for other people, leca and Cattleyas absolutely don't mix. So it really depends on environment and how you can work with your product. Brenda is saying that my light seems to be very bright when I film. Do my orchids get this much light all the time? Yes, with the exception of night, of course. I have my artificial lighting on a timer. So I'll link it down below to my video about these panels. These are my, well, rather new shop light LED panels, which I use on this particular shelf. And yes, they are very bright in comparison to what I used to have. Just to show you a little difference between the light for my phals and this shelf. It is pretty bright. It's not blinding bright, but yeah, it is actually pretty bright, and it does run in the daytime. And I will be switching to these LED panels for my other shelves as well, but all in due time. The Orchid Geek is asking me if I throw away my virus orchids or if I keep them and quarantine them. Well, I have been lucky not to have virus orchids lately, or if I did, which, you know, most probably I did, they kind of withered off on their own. I lost the Melissa Briannae, it withered off. Maybe it had a virus, maybe not. It didn't show signs necessarily on the leaves, but who knows at this point. Other than that, I didn't really have much signs to worry about. I do have a few phalaenopsis which simply refuse to grow, but they don't have signs, so I cannot tell you for sure if I had any virus orchids lately or not. I lost a few, yes, but I'm not entirely sure why. And with the ones that I tested and I did confirm they had the virus, I kept them actually separated, but they kind of had a tendency to wither off on their own. They're very fragile. Once the virus takes over, it's pretty much downhill from there. At least this has been my experience with the virus orchids. Virus can stay dormant in an orchid and can activate and take over if the orchid is super stressed. So there is a chance I have virus orchids. You can never know if it does not show. But if I would discover a virus orchid, I don't know, I think I would just put it aside, separate it, and see how it performs. But yeah, as I was saying, my experience has been that they kind of wither off in time. Speaking about sick plants, let me show you one since we're here. This is my Sideria, you guys. Something's happening to my Sideria. Well, it does have the orchid flag virus. Ever since she had the spider mites, and ever since then, she has never been super vigorous for me. With her and the Bellina, I always kind of wanted to get replacements just to have them, just to make sure. Now I think I will get a replacement for the Sideria. My little Sideria is acting very weird. So here we have a withering off leaf, but it has some spotting. This leaf has some spotting as well. There has been no water or misting or anything of the sorts on my plants. I do have a little spot here as well. The leaves will actually get the spots of the orchid flag virus. She's really weak. She has roots, but you can see she's not really performing and growing normally like she's supposed to and like she grew in previous years. So I might actually have to give this one up and get a replacement for my Sideria, which is sad because you guys know how much I actually love Siderias. But yeah, what to do? Since you asked, there you have it. The Sideria is acting up and I know she has a virus. It's just not a bad virus, but who knows? Maybe it actually is a bad virus. And I know you're seeing this in the background. This is mechanical damage. This is how I purchased this one, so don't worry. Alrighty, I'm gonna go wash my hands, be back with some more questions. As it just so happens, we actually have a question about this virus. Carrie is asking if Dendrobiums are also prone to getting the orchid flake virus. Kind of. Whenever I had spider mites on my Dendrobiums, I did have these discolorations, the chlorosis, but it didn't linger on as much. With Phalaenopsis, even after years of being pest-free, they still have the dots. This is the new leaf. We'll see if this one Nah, I already see spotting here. It will develop. So with the Phalaenopsis, which have been the most affected by this virus, it is systemic, it lingers on, it doesn't go away, sadly. This has been my experience with Phalaenopsis type orchids, and that's what I was saying. I want to get some replacements because I really don't know if this thing will go away with the immune system of the orchid. As far as Dendrobium goes, I did have some of these spottings on my Nobiles, but they're absolutely fine. Once the leaves fell and new leaves were produced, this did not come back. So I'm not sure if it has a bigger impact on monopodials rather than sympodials, but in my experience, even though some leaves were affected, or actually maybe they just looked like this, the virus didn't really linger on. I don't have a strip for the orchid flake virus, so I don't know if the Dendrobiums had this, but right now they don't. They're absolutely fine. So I wouldn't worry about the Dendrobiums. I'm definitely worried about the Phalaenopsis and the false spider mite. Well, what do you know? We actually do have another question about the semi-hydro reservoir. What do I do when the roots go into the reservoir? Nothing. You don't have to do anything. Eventually they will go into the reservoir. All I will say is that if the temperatures are low, you can have some issues with the cold water affecting the root system, affecting the orchid as well. Edema, as some of you know, is caused by cold water. So with anything that has to do with the reservoir or with excessive moisture in the medium, I would always try to put the orchids in warmer conditions rather than cold conditions. And that is about it for today. Thank you guys so much for watching. I have to tell you guys, these few days will be a little bit busy for me. I will do my best to keep posting every day, but I might have a day or two where I will not post. We'll go back to normal schedule next week, but just in case, now you know, nothing to worry about. So you know the drill, like or dislike this video below, subscribe to my channel for regular orchid videos, tutorials, Q&As and other fun orchid topics. And if you like YouTube to notify you whenever I upload a new video, just turn on notifications for my channel. If you're interested in my setup, the pots that I use, medium and so on, just expand the description. I have everything listed there. And with that said, I'll see you guys next time. Bye!